what other music of yours did he record, and how did he? Why did he say he liked your music?
He didn't say. He just liked it, and I was grateful for that because he recorded the stuff. He was one of the first people to ever record my music, and he was a wonderful interpreter of my music. You know, he made everything sound like a song rather than a bunch of chords put together and blown over. He had a great melodic gift, Stan did.
He had a gift. You're right, and it was put to good use. Where do you think? Can you talk in your own? I'm not. You weren't there, I don't believe. But how do you think, aside from being on the road in ninth grade and what comes with that, musically, what did Stan learn from being with Teagarden?
Couldn't tell you that. Couldn't tell you that. He, because I was in in these dumb schools I was going to at the time, and I didn't even know anything was going on.
Let me ask you though.
But I know Teagarden was just a marvelous, just a marvelous influence for anybody. But I just thought that. Being in a band with Teagarden, he would have learned how I could. I don't think Teagarden taught him anything, and he was there with Maury Stein, of course, who I think had quite a bit of influence on Stan.
I want to talk to. Can you specific?
I think Stan was even too young to go on the road. He had to have somebody adopt him.
No, the truant office. Teagarden.
Yeah, like Harry James adopted Corky Corcoran back in those days, so that he could be responsible for him because he was underage.
How did Maury Stein affect Stan?
Well, he was a stabling influence, I guess, but I don't know. Maury was a wonderful saxophone player, and he sort of took Stan under his wing, I think. And Stan never forgot it, because Stan was very, very young, very green then,
Can you talk about the last memory you have of being with Stan before he passed away?
Yeah, I can, because I was actually there when he was on the verge of dying, and he was in a house that Herb Alpert had rented for him. Herbie just loved Herb Alpert was one of the greatest people I've ever known as far as being kind, doing great things for other people. And I remember Stan was on the verge of dying, and all the flies and everything knew this, and they were coming around him, and he couldn't, he just couldn't shake them loose. And we knew that they knew something, like he wasn't going to be with us long. But I don't know how I got on this, as a matter of fact.
That's okay. No,
Herbie always thought Stan was God as far as musically playing,
No, the question was your last memory of you and Stan sharing anything together before he passed.
That was it. Oh, and I used to take him to Alcoholics Anonymous meetings, say, at that time. I mean, this was like right towards the end of his life. And he and I always got along great. He was always very kind to me.
Right.
And whenever he had a band where I could play, he had us. I'd be there.
What do you mean play? You'd play too?
What? I'd play too, yeah, but it would be like for example, he had a great band up at the Apollo in 1950 or 51. And listen to this for a bill. He was the band leader, and we had saxes. We had Jerry Mulligan, Zoot Sims, and Don Lamphere, and then Stan himself. were the saxes, and we had Harry Sweets Edison on trumpet, and Al Porcino and Stan Fichelson. They were all there, and I was the only trombone, but I was playing bass trumpet at that time, which is in the same key, kind of. You can play trombone music on the bass trumpet. And on the bill was Charlie Parker with strings, Sarah Vaughan and with her thing, doing her act, Timmy Rogers. It was just a wild week at the Apollo in 1952. And, Stan always made sure I was around, and I was.
Were people jitterbug waltzing during that? Or, that was not Norman Granz stuff?
No, it was a regular stage show over at the Apollo, which was a regular... the Apollo was a black version of the Paramount or the Strand downtown. And, they'd play movies, and then they'd have a band in between. And the stage would come up, and it was the black version of the white theaters downtown that featured in person entertainment, like the Paramount Theater or the Strand Theater, that were both on Broadway.
What did it say to have a bunch of white cats playing at a black theater at that time?
In 1952, it didn't mean a thing at all.
But then why?
They'd book bands that swung into the Apollo all the time, no matter what color they were. If the band swung, the dancers loved. The dancers they had a dancing line, chorus girls. They loved having a band that swung. They didn't care what color they were. And if they didn't swing, they'd be very unhappy. So that's why Charlie Barnett and Buddy Rich and bands I was in could always play the Apollo, and looked forward to doing it because there was always a lot of funny things that went on, particularly with the amateur nights. But that's another thing.
Yeah, no.
And Stan always made sure that I was there. See, he's another kindness of his.
He would just call you and let you know that it was happening, and he wanted you to play with him.
Yeah.
This is something he said about. I just bring up the white-black thing because he was talking about. Norman Granz paired Getz and Gillespie in the studio. Diz and Getz. It's a Gillespie.
Right.
It's a Gillespie session. He calls the tune, sets the tempos. He kicks it off with a blistering. Don't mean a thing. It ain't got that swing. And Getz says, and he's quoting, "They thought they were going to show the white hope, what it was all about." But Stan really. So I mean,
I don't know where you got that particular piece of information, but it wasn't true.
Joseph Hooper, 1991, through the years in the New York Times. That's Stan's direct quote. I'm just saying, he was very competitive on the bandstand with the African American players. I mean, there's no denying.
Oh,
that.
You bet.
And so,
because he had technique coming out of his ears. He really learned how to play the saxophone. All these people, that were great players, generally spent a whole lot of their time by themselves learning their instruments. And generally, they came from poor families, so there weren't any distractions really. When they came out, they were pretty fully formed as far as being able to get around on their instruments.
Stan refers to that as knowing the literature, but
knowing the repertoire. I don't know if that's quite the same.
Right.
You had to really play. You have to really. I think Zoot Sims was a perfect example, too. These guys came from poor families, and so they were confined to really learning and practicing their instruments a lot when they were kids. And so they came out with this ridiculously good technique. Dizzy was another one. Charlie Parker was another one. They almost always came from poor families that couldn't afford the other kinds entertainments and things like that. They really learned their ick. That's why Joe Maney became so great. Same thing.
Can you just go a little bit deeper as opposed to someone in academia being poor, maybe not having the finest instruments playing and not having access to a lot of resources, how that would enable somebody like Stan or Zoot to develop their own individual sound and their prowess?
Well, I don't think they were thinking about developing their own sound. They were just trying to learn their instruments well enough so they could play along with records that they'd buy, and they weren't. I don't think they were thinking of that much of the future as much as they spent a lot of time with their instruments and became great technicians. Just because a lot of times the family couldn't afford any kind of other things, and that's why some of these guys like Zoot and Stan, people like that. Al Cohn was different because he started writing very early, and he had a band. It was a different thing. He and I were born one day apart, in fact.
I want to. This is really important, Johnny. Can you talk about how I know Stan was incredibly proud of the album Focus with Eddie Sauter. Do you?
Oh yeah.
Can you talk about the significance of that album? What was groundbreaking about that album at that time?
Oh well, it's the first time you heard him with strings, but written the way that Eddie Sauter would write them, much different than like with Bird with strings, which were just very pedestrian arrangements of songs, and Bird just doing what he wanted to do with them. Focus was a masterpiece of a piece of, all that credit belongs to, who am I thinking of again?
Stan?
Eddie Sauter.
Oh, Eddie Sauter. Yeah. So we're
that's what made this. That was what made it special.
Explain though, where Bird was going off and doing his own thing, Stan had to incorporate his own work inside of Sauter's arrangements. Is that it?
Yeah, he did.
And nobody had done that before.
No, but Stan has such great ears; he could improvise over anything. By then, he had his instrument under such control that he could play anything. He was like that. Plus, he had a great melodic ear.
Johnny,
whereas he wasn't like a songwriter. He would hear all the chords and know what to do with them.
Well, he was like you said, he was a master interpreter, which I love. In 3 minutes, Johnny, would you tell me about your relationship and your love for Quincy Jones?
Well, Quincy Jones and I sort of we met when he was with Lionel Hampton and I was with Count Basie relatively late, like in 1954, and we immediately became friends. We used to laugh at the same shit and all that, same things, all that kind of thing.
Like what? What kind of stuff would you laugh about?
Oh, I don't. It's hard to explain because it wouldn't sound funny to someone else.
Well, I do know that.
Let me put it that way.
When Terry Gibbs did a Jewish jazz album, Quincy produced it. Showed up with a yarmulke and a tallis on.
Oh, sure.
Right? Anyway. Go ahead. So your relationships formed early, and then
very early.
Yeah, continue on.
We just had a lot to say to each other, and we just immediately became friends because we weren't great players, but we were very much into what made good music, what made a good song, what a good arrangement was, and we were developing along the same lines, kind of. I was with Basie, and he was with Lionel Hampton. And it was in 1954, and that was, it went on from there.
Can you talk about a seminal album that you guys collaborated on where it just all was magic?
No, I can't think of any such thing. I can't. No.
Okay. Well, Johnny, we'll be coming to see you on video real soon. It's just, I really, really appreciate you taking the time today. You were glorious as usual and very, very articulate. And bless you, my friend.
Okay, and thank you.
All right.
For giving us all a place to go.
Absolutely.
Okay.
We'll do it again, man.
You got it.
Later on.
Bye.
And that's a wrap for the Jake Feinberg Show here. First week of August here at Power Talk. Thanks to Mike Roper across the way, running the board. We'll be back next week. We got a nice month coming up here as I continue this saga of Stan Getz Saga, the Jazz Man. We're still trying to figure out the name of the film, but it's coming along. Please go to StanGettsMovie.com to check it out. And that's it. We'll see you next week. This is the Jake Feinberg Show. Peace.
I don't know. I've been playing blues for quite a while. I've been around the world a few times, but I don't understand. I just like to play the blues. It's not all the money that I want. I just like to play the blues. And I like for everybody to get together and all of us play the blues. Let's have a good time. Because blues is why it's at. I'm telling you, I love it. I can't help but play it. So when you wake up in the morning,
You're on a gig.
and ain't got no money, or no gig, whatever you call it, you ain't got nothing but the blues no way, baby. Or either your old lady gonna do yagging you and arguing with you, telling you what you get up and do something.